Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this Perspective Nation. Today is the 14th, and we're going to be having an interesting topic, which is how artificial intelligence is transforming manufacturing. Our guest today is Adolphina. She is a specialist in this field, artificial intelligence, precision mechanics, and mechatronics. So we are going to be learning all of this and more. So to start off, Adolphina, how are you doing? How is your day?
Yes, greetings everybody. I'm blessed to be here. My day has been lovely with the sun. I'm just excited to have the sun back here in Toronto.
Well, everybody is happy that the sun is here. Before we go, I'm going to make a couple of announcements. One of the main announcements is that the Black Engineers of Canada, they will be having an event on the 19th, which is engineering your way to the top, moving up the corporate ladder. The information to join or to participate is going to be on the chat. You can always check on that. On Saturday, April 29 as well, Council of Nigerian Professionals, they're going to be having an in-person event, Black History Impact Celebration. It has a lot of, there'll be some discussion, there'll be awards given to our kids, and I'll encourage others to attend, and we'll definitely have the link pasted as well. And I would maybe repeat this at the end of the day. So let's go back and start our discussion about artificial intelligence in manufacturing. Now, Adolphina, when we are talking about mechatronics, AI automation, precision machine, what are we talking about? What these big words? What should I tell my grandma that you do?
I think the simplest way to communicate what we do is all the tools and the smaller components that it takes to build these larger structures, systems, machines around us, from buildings that you need a screw and a nut and a bolt to, bridges and all the beams and the metal fabrication that's behind these industries and behind most of the infrastructure here in Canada since the Second World War. So yeah, like our industry is mostly creating the tools that it takes to get these customized jobs done on a repetitive basis, for longevity, and also to maximize the production volumes to, mass produce everything from the cars we drive to the planes we fly in to even the basic components inside of your cell phone.
Okay, so it's a really a wide range of things could be done, especially anything that can be mass produced. But before we dive into this, let's take a step back and talk about you. Like, a part of work or school, what are some of the things you do? What or if somebody says, describe yourself, what are you telling that person?
The best way to describe myself is I'm a nerd. I love tinkering with the machines around me. I like customizing a lot of the features and the products around me to save time. So I've always been interested in efficiency, saving my time, saving my energy when it came to chores around the house. I'm an only girl in my family, so I have 3 brothers. So a lot of responsibilities comes with that, especially when you immigrate from West Africa and you come to North America, where you don't have as many supports as you do in Africa, right? So a lot of the things around the house that needed fixing or needed some sort of adjustment, I'd much rather save time, save money, figure out how to fix them myself, or learn how to create things from whatever we had around. So I've always been interested in metals as well. Mining was a huge industry in Sierra Leone, which is the country I come from. And I also love trains. So the automotion and the automotive industry is supported by the innovations that tool makers make on a much smaller scale, right? Because you need to drill so many times repetitively and in the same location when you're making something like components for the engine of a car or for the brakes that go in the car. You need to be consistent, you need to be precise, and I can do this through coding and controlling computers to repetitively do those motions and those actions.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it's all about efficiency. It's saving time, saving energy.
Well, I was just talking about Council of Nigerian Professionals. They actually have a volunteer program for people who can teach coding. Maybe we'll talk about that later. It's something that they do, and it's like free for everybody, especially kids, and as well as adults. Let's take a step back again. And what do you actually do? What are some of the equipment or some of the things that we know that you have either been part of it or the company that you work for has been part of it? Is there any product out there that you can say that everybody can identify with, or most people can identify with?
Yeah, like as I mentioned, a lot of the vehicles that are manufactured here in sort of the GTA Oshawa area, a lot of the manufacturing that happens in this corridor around Lake Ontario, I've been on assignments for those type of custom jobs where we're finding a lot more investments are being made in electric vehicles and the infrastructure to support those electric vehicles, from charging stations to power storage facilities, right? So yeah, I can't speak about specifics just because I'm in the military field.
I think we get it. We just want to know, like, you know,
yeah,
the field
like,
you are in can be anything, like from cell phones to...
It can. And I specialize in precision machining, which means I work in the thous and tenths of thous, which is, you can see the features on a piece of metal that I cut, not with the naked eye, but maybe under some microscopes.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. When you talk about precision machining or mechanics, what are we looking about? Like, what are, like, how do you explain that to somebody who sells food on the side of the road? Like, what do you get, and why does it have to be that precise?
Well, to keep all the cars driving, you know, with the control of the wheel, it takes a lot of sections of components for the gears to be controlled and connected to the steering wheel and the other, you know, the command console. So I think the fact that everybody's safer with like just looking at cars and the automotive industry, as well as how, you know, the food industry is supplied through transport logistics and then through manufacturing and automation to repeat these processes in food processing, beverage processing. So I mean, yeah, like if it's anything that a manufacturer can do on a larger scale for production, whether it's repeat cutting, I can do everything from creating all the components that would connect to a gear arm that can now be programmed to cut on a timer, you know, at a certain height on a certain time, like, you know, repetitive motion. So all right, that's the best way I can explain.
Since you are from Africa, I'll take you back to our mother's kitchen. So would they always cut vegetables, they cut things? Can somebody come to you and say, you know what, I want to open a restaurant and I want to, I don't know, some vegetable soup, and I want you to cut within a specific dimension? Explain to me how that conversation will go and what you are going to do.
Yeah, so like that's actually pretty simple for me because I can see everything from the cutting tool to the control system to automate that process. So you definitely would need certain gears and motors as well as sensors, because for measurement and accuracy, we integrate a lot of sensors and lasers nowadays in manufacturing. So yeah, the dimensions that you give me is what's going to dictate how high, you know, the knife will rise and fall, or how frequently, or how the cutting board might rotate to accommodate a shape, or how 3 arms might cut, to make that more efficient. So yeah, you can really just draw me a picture and I can really and truly reverse engineer it down to the screw size that we need to make sure that everything doesn't fall apart.
Yeah, some of us, we have a lot of equipment which are broken, like broken plastic and things like that. If I give you a broken plastic of, say, a TV, can you regenerate it?
Yeah, it's actually a passion and a hobby of mine to redirect waste. I think waste diversion, especially when it comes to technology, is important now because there are a lot of raw materials that are being mined when we also have a lot of that same material in landfills where a lot of older technology has found itself, right? So I won't say I can make the TV do exactly the same thing, but I can repurpose those components to something more innovative because we're getting smaller and smaller with time when it comes to tech. So, older components might need some retrofitting to create something new. So maybe taking TV components and making, a game, or making a projector, or making a light with the wiring. So yeah, I definitely actually like repurposing old tech, or also reviving retro gaming and game consoles. It's a hobby of mine.
Wow, that's interesting. Now let me ask you this. How does artificial intelligence improve productivity?
Yes, I mean, it's definitely important when it comes to quality assurance. And that's something that's key to me because in efficiency, you need to maintain quality standards. You don't want to lose quality to save time. And you also need to be consistent and precise when you're dealing with microscopic measurements. So AI can do everything from, multi-processing, which is having multiple functions happening at the same time, or even within milliseconds of each other, which can be the difference between, moving through a system on a production line, or even in one machine, having different operations happen at a precise time to avoid collisions or, any kind of other issues that might happen. So it's definitely timing and improving on timing, improving on, measurements using lasers and such, because you can get things to move at very high speeds repetitively and consistently give you that same measurement you need with this skill set as a machinist. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So we have a question from one of those listening. It said, "Thank you so much for talking to us today. Does this mean we can automate the fish roll process?" So basically, it's like a fish roll. How do I describe it? You know what is fish roll?
No, please help me understand.
So basically, it's something that you put a bit of fish. It's a food. You put a bit of fish in dough, but you have to roll it, then fry it.
Okay, do some people call it like fish balls or fish cakes?
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's actually a very simple process because you break it, as you said, you put one smaller component in a larger one. So that's one motion. And then having the rolling action is very, very easy with just gears, right? So yeah, such a specialized machine can be built using smaller components by just breaking up those steps.
It's interesting that we have somebody like you in the community who is familiar with how all these things can be done, and nobody knows about it. It's strange.
Yeah, it's not strange actually, because I'm surrounded by others just like me. Most of my peers are doctors or lawyers or women in tech in some way or another, and they're all working on just really innovating, outdated systems and changing them from behind the scenes. So yeah, it's pretty common.
Yeah, I think I don't know how common it is to have women in your field. We generally hear that in the IT world, there are few women, let alone women from Africa. Is it common? Have you been exposed to more women like you from Africa when you go to like conferences or to meetings?
I'm blessed to have women who are in my family who have been scientists and healers and doctors and naturopaths, and also in the military where a lot of these innovations thrive, right? A lot of the funding for most manufacturing innovation comes out of the military sector. So yeah, I've been able to see demonstrations of innovative machines from a very young age. My father's an engineer, so he has been very open with, despite me being the only girl, us having conversations about how cities are built and managed, and how these processes kind of feed into the systems that guide us every day. So I've been blessed with my family. I didn't have to look far. Everybody's a professor or an engineer or a doctor, some type of scientist.
Okay, we have another question from the audience. So this is about the cost. I was going to talk about the cost. So what's the estimated cost to come up with such a machine if you have to use it for simple domestic cooking, like the fish balls that we're talking about?
Yeah, it's so most of my experience, I've been in robotics for the last 15 years. I knew very on that I wanted to just create because I have an artistic side. So yeah, I've experienced different machines that are similar in the food processing industry, because I'm now actually, because of my entrepreneurship, stepping more into food processing, agriculture, and beverages as well. So such a machine, you can, I mean, this is a very rough estimate. It takes a lot of components to really be accurate, right? But I would say at least 60 to 80,000 Canadian
Okay.
for not just the machining, but also the customizing, because you'll need to use one machine to create another machine, right? So I'm considering the whole, like, approximately 3 components of that process of making the fish balls and then spewing them out into a bowl or a tray. Yeah, I think at about 60 to 80,000 Canadian, and that's to start. It could go up depending on, having a sensor that keeps the balls the same size, having, any kind of pneumatics when it comes to the speed that you would like to process at. There are also manual versions of such that I've seen, like dumpling makers that sort of have one component manually feeding into another, where you might want something faster, right? So yeah, it can only go up from there.
So you said you are also an entrepreneur. Can you tell us some of the ventures you are trying in, some of the challenges you've been solving on your own?
Yeah, and it is a very recent change. Just through the pandemic, I saw the opportunities organically coming to me. People would repeatedly ask me to do certain tasks, and the engineer in me said, business. So I'm involved in everything from cleaning and waste diversion, as I mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, as well as transportation and distribution logistics. I do a lot of data management, data stewardship, not just the work, but also the training that's required for people to have access to private data when it comes to healthcare, as well as, just food industry. There's a lot of private information that crosses both those pathways, right? So yeah, a lot of projects specifically in also retrofitting old agricultural equipment, which is something new that I've been doing,
So
where they're looking.
give us an example of retrofitting all agricultural equipment that you've done, and where did you do it? Was it here or was it in Africa?
It was actually here. I have some peers that run organic farms and aquaponic farms for research reasons. So having custom plumbing and custom irrigation, as well as integrating solar panels to their systems, like their water pumps and such, that's smaller scale projects that I've been involved in. But I look forward to doing a lot more, not just here in Canada, but taking what I've learned to Africa to sort of do skill sharing and also prototyping of some solar integrations that I've done on smaller scale over here.
Ah, that's nice. It's interesting you are doing data. We had a professor of statistics, I think about a month ago on the platform, and he too was talking about the importance of us understanding data and how data controls the world and things like that. And it was and encouraging us to take part in like surveys and those and things like that. So what are some of the drawbacks when we start implementing all this artificial intelligence, automation, and especially in other businesses? What are some of the drawbacks you can think of?
I mean, the number one drawback that actually does keep me up at night sometimes is who owns this information. You know, now that a lot of things are open access, a lot of information is accessible online and on different versions of the web that we may not see every day. And so, you know, who has access behind the screen, or who is behind the screen, you know, reading this info, knowing your address and your name and your blood type, you know, and all these specific things about an individual. You know, there are a lot of gaps in the journey that data takes because of lack of training, lack of infrastructure, as like secure storage, right? And also with a lot of the data leaks we've heard of on the news, like, you know, there's a huge vulnerability there. And with the, you know, ChatGPT is not a new AI generator. It's just becoming public knowledge, but we've been using these back when I was in school learning coding, and, you know, like coding mid-production, you know, to account for any changes in everything from the temperature to the speed or the material, anything. So we've been using AI generators in coding to compare for human error so that we can be more agile with the machine as the machine is learning, right? So, I mean, I worry about, you know, other people being able to do this every single day and add to the pot of information and misinformation and disinformation, because people can be led astray by how accessible all the information is, and when there's no one kind of moderating what's true, what's not, what's accurate, what's not.
So you talk about the risk of who has information and who has control over it, and you work with robots, for example. Are you not worried that someday somebody, say in America, will be able to train a robot or write some program and give a robot a gun to go into schools and start shooting people?
I mean, behavioral conditioning is a part of machine learning that I studied. And so there are forms of that already happening. You know, there are even people who are being conditioned to take these same actions you're talking about. So the robots that we're thinking of may just be your cell phone, and that, you know, machine learning it's doing of seeing your patterns and seeing your behaviors, and then sending you purposeful information to skew your next move, right?
That's interesting. Like, let's go down there. Let's tell me how myself. I don't think all of us here, or most people who have cell phone, look at their cell phone as a robot. When we talk about a robot, we are looking at something in the manufacturing space, carrying one thing to another or turning something. How is my cell phone a robot?
I see my cell phone as a robot. I know that she's listening to my conversations. I know that there is access to her camera, and I call my phone her, because yeah, like there are a lot of components and features that our phones have now. Our phones are just tiny computers. And so the mic, the speaker, the camera, all these separate parts can be controlled by another computer. And computer control will teach you to see even the little GPS chip in some of the little fitness trackers people have. You'll start to see those things as robots too, because they are programmable. They can be controlled by another computer. Even though the feature seems minimal, like there are ways where it can have a great impact with time.
So can you, like in your field or some of the things you do, have you actually encountered some of these issues where somebody I don't know. I'm worried that I work in an automotive industry and they're installing a new robot, and I'm worried about it. And I program it to, for every 2,000 parts that it makes, it should destroy the 100 so that I have a job to repair this 100. Have you seen situations like that, sabotage?
It's interesting. I had one assignment in a workshop where I was the youngest person, and so most of the workers that were also machinists were 40s and 50s, and I was in my 20s at the time. So I was also the only woman. I was also the only Black person.
Yeah, that was what I was going.
So I was actually brought in to integrate some of these automations on the older, I'm like, you're thinking World War II machines that are still running today and giving high quality results. Like, as you said, out of 2,000, only 100 parts might have damage or be scrapped. So, you know, I was brought in to apply some of the sensory measuring that would be more precise rather than a person measuring by hand. I was also brought in because at a point in the manufacturing cycle, products got shipped to other countries before they would get quality assurance. And, you know, these are the issues that will cause, you know, waste efficiency, right? If you transport a product before you measure it, if it's wrong, you now have to transport it back and you've wasted material and you have to do the job again. You've also wasted time and other resources. So I was brought in to sort of add more sensors, more computerized measuring tools into their workspace. And I got a lot of pushback, and I did witness, not necessarily sabotage, I cannot say, but I did witness that issue with parts being intentionally damaged to create more work, which to me is inefficient in that way. So yes, it does happen quite often.
Are you at any point worried that some of the software or some of the automation that you are doing, all this your artificial intelligence, are you not worried that at one time machines are going to take over your job?
Not at all. And that's why I always bring up entrepreneurship when it comes to career planning or future goal setting, because understanding them at the base level gives me the option to put, you know, little back doors in my coding for an extra level of security and control, right? And at the end of the day, I'm controlling computers, whether it's by speaking their language through coding or adding the components through mechanical engineering to make that computer now have an arm, now have a leg, now have wheels. You understand? So I know that the computer can only go as far as I kind of control it to. It's not going to move on its own. Even with the coding that I do,
Yeah,
I have to be mindful.
For when you are doing things like that, what are some of the measures you put in place to guarantee continuity? So if you are not there, for example, and you are the ones doing the coding, what are some of the things that have to be in place so somebody else has to know what is going on?
Yeah, like every coder is different because you have to look at coding like a language, and we're speaking to the machine or we're speaking to the computer to give it instruction to do whatever we instruct, right? So, or whatever we command. So I know safeguards are up to me because I do machine setups. I do everything from, like, when I get a new machine, or even if I come to a new site and I have to work on a machine, I take everything apart and put it back together before I start my work, because I don't trust anybody who may have done it or what they may or may not have known or done. And I know the fail safes that I would use in terms of limiting how fast a motor can go, you know, through the coding.
So when you say you take everything down and you are working with these big companies, the military, automotive, aeronautics, do they allow you to do that?
So I have a bit, I'm a specialist, so I can do 3 jobs. Like, I can do the job of 3 people when it comes to the machine that I specialize in. So I can do setups, and then I can also, setups is the mechanical side. And then I can also program and proof, which is the sort of computer side. And I also have the electrical side with the sensors and gears. So being able to think from three heads, sort of, when it comes to these machines makes me take everything down mechanically, build it up from scratch, and integrate my electronics, integrate my computer programming to factor in the way I set it up. And every machine is a little bit different. It can be a little bit in the orientation of the gears and spindles, or the manual setup of the person who put the machine together or put the components and tools together. So I like to start from a blank slate. I always have, and that's just my preference. But there are fail safes you can code into your work, or controls you can put into the process.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. By you doing that, are you securing your job? Because if you have to put everything down and start all over from scratch, then basically you own that machine, or you are the only one who can repair that machine. Does that mean that
nobody can do what I do, right? And
yeah.
I think that was why I had to become an entrepreneur and subcontract rather than be an employee and be stuck with limitations. Also, the speed, like I could be given a job that may have a 4-hour setup and I can do it in 20 minutes, So being an employee means I have to be on pay, like in a facility for 13 hours, 14 hours, even though it takes me 20 minutes to do the job that I need to do, right?
So when you do the job for 20 minutes, you charge the 4 hours anyway, since you are now
no, I tend to add the extra steps of taking things apart, cleaning, because a lot of these machines don't get the proper maintenance as well. And that's another skill set I built. So,
okay. So when we talk of the maintenance and somebody who is looking from outside, and some of these, let's take construction machines, for example. There are a lot of people who don't even want to touch these machines. Do you think everybody walking around these machines need to get some education on what they are capable of doing, and if they should be scared of them, or if you are touching them, you should know what you are doing?
Definitely. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of videos online of these like construction site fails. And those videos tell you exactly why training and certification is important with any machine. Even like your toaster, people don't read the manual for things and they're like, I know how to use this. And then boom, like there's an explosion, or something breaks down, or something malfunctions because you didn't learn the base function. So I always recommend, like, yeah, especially on construction sites, because it's high risk for personal injury, learn the machines you're surrounded by. I'm the type of person who will read a manual cover to cover.
How difficult is it to become an AI specialist, or to work in the automation industry, especially from somebody coming from Africa?
I feel like African youth are primed for this industry. We are more resilient. We are more innovative just by the circumstances we find ourselves in. And all of the industry, like the first world industries of today and the world powers of today, most of their innovation was driven by Africans. And so we're not lacking in skills. We're not lacking in anything. And our parents and our ancestors gave us all those skills. So if America was built by slaves from Africa, I don't see why Africans wouldn't be given that that you guys are the innovators, you are the creators, the first.
Yeah, but you also need to have access to education. Is not free nowadays, and sometimes it's expensive. With all these good ideas that we can do, sometimes even our curriculum is a stumbling block. What are some of the things you would change to make it easier for these kids that you say Africans are built for this type of field? What are some of the things you would change right now?
I would stop giving the textbooks so much praise just because of who wrote those textbooks. You mentioned something earlier, and this resonates. The data doesn't exist because we didn't create it. Data is created. right? We have to put pen to paper and write things down. We have a habit of giving oral history, which is nice. Storytelling has its value, but writing things down has another level of value where it outlasts you. So next generations won't waste time doing what you've already done. And I think that's what's lacking. So instead of praising these textbooks, we might want to also give youth just tools, basic tools. And these tools and raw ingredients are from Africa. They're being mined in Africa and shipped up to other places for processing. So giving them the tools to build their own infrastructure, giving them the skills to put, two pieces of metal together and weld it with heat, which smelting isn't new for us. Maybe if we look back at these old techniques and skills that our forefathers used, we might see a new level of value in it, because all these other industrialized countries are basing their industry on what we were doing. Yes, definitely more hands-on, more practical learning. Forget about the books. At a point, you might prove a book wrong. And I've been there in maths and statistics. There have been, equations and differential equations that were unsolvable. And there are youth who are very young and who haven't gone through the more traditional education system who are solving them today.
Okay. How do you see automation and precision machines and artificial intelligence in the future, so in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see? What are the major changes you're expecting?
Too much cloud integration and particularization of the data, so turning it into waves that can be transmitted, and that is the one direction I see things going. Also, hopefully more alternate power and energy sources being integrated in technology, because the massive electric vehicle infrastructure that's being invested in today, all these investments will drive where people live, they will drive the healthcare sector, and they will drive the food industry and agriculture. And so these things will drive sort of where the funds will need to go. And food production is becoming an issue with all the sporadic weather, the extreme weather that we're facing across the globe.
So I understand that some of these machines, especially if you are dealing with like aeronautics, Boeing, for example, for them to create an aircraft, they have to have some estimate or some perception of what is going to happen in the next 20 years. And then they start investing now. Are you working in any projects like that, this long-term projects, or do you have any ideas on something that you're like, okay, in the next 20 years to 30 years, this is what is going to happen, and this is what we have to prepare now?
Yeah, I've been in the drones, the manufacturing of components for drones and some guided satellites, which are a form of drone. So yeah, that's the main trend that I'm seeing will probably outlast even the electric vehicle innovation that's happening. I think whether it's single flyer or double flyer or unmanned aerospace vehicles, I think that's an industry that we need to really create space for and intentionally innovate in, because flying flying is just bringing the world closer together, and distribution is, there's not enough infrastructure in the distribution networks. I think when it comes to my community, I don't need to go outside to get things that I could get from my peers if we have better distribution and contact, right? So I think, yeah, aerospace as well as the EV sector, because these investments are going to be 10, 15 year, even just to build some of the spaces and the capacity that our population here in Canada will need, because they're doubling the immigration limitations just to have more workers. And so, yeah, I think the electric vehicle and electric power sector for cars and automotives, that's trains, trucks, everything there, as well as watercrafts, just transportation
Yeah.
And the means and infrastructure to support that is the biggest investment that I see long term.
What is your opinion about these cars that we are supposed to sit in and the drivers? What's your opinion on that?
I mean, I think that it's a great opportunity for the youth that are going to be finishing school and being prepared for jobs when this infrastructure is finally about 75% built. Because to get to capacity for usage, there needs to be the base foundational infrastructure built, right? Storage facilities and such. Even the roads. Our network of roads isn't that great here in the city. So that's a big investment for the province of Ontario. But yeah.
Don't you think there will be a gap when we go towards that, having automated driving cars, everything automated, and Africa is still there? Don't you think there's going to be a gap? And you were talking about reuse and recycling of waste. Would that not be a perfect avenue for the Western countries to say, okay, we don't want to dump our cars, Africa, you can have them, similar to what was done with electronic waste, refrigerators, and things like that? Don't you think that would be the outcome in the next 15, 20 years?
I don't want to give power to those words, but I see where you're coming from in saying that. I choose to be optimistic and just encourage youth to get involved in transport logistics at any level, because it's such a huge piece of bread that we should be breaking too. Also, Africa has, like, well, you know, equatorial Africa has access to so much solar power, which is just increasing every day. So I think investing in the infrastructure to harness that solar power and transform it into, you know, agriculture or roads or, you know, transportation infrastructure supports, you know, just harnessing the solar power, I think would be key for our future.
Do you have any ethical dilemma when you realize that some of the machines you are working on, or some of the automation, some of this your precision cutting that you are doing is going to take over the job of somebody or some group of people? One robot might replace what, 5 people on the belt, on the manufacturing line. They don't need to be in a union. They don't need a salary. They don't need sick days off. They don't respond to weather. Don't you think that's an ethical dilemma that some of us are already facing?
Innovation is like a rising tide. So I believe all the boats are going to rise. It's just that you have to go with the flow. The water is more powerful than you are. And when you admit that, you have a much better time sailing. So I think if instead of focusing on how machines can replace us, we focus on how we can better control or, you know, have controls in place for these machines, and also how we can position ourselves to, you know, innovate on these machines when it comes to maintenance and repair. I think if we focus and shift our thinking in that way, where we are more, you know, in control of like our coding before we turn on the machine. So let's focus on the coding and give that the time. It might be an efficient use of our time to focus on knowing how to code for spindle speeds and temperature changes and machine material expansion and all these things, making yourself more well-versed in like supporting these systems that are being put in place rather than fighting them might work out better for people, because that's pretty much what I did. I learned the language of the computer.
So if I have a young man out there who wants to get into an industry like you, what should I be telling him? Should I be calling you and saying, hey, Adolphina, I have this young man here. I have no clue about coding. I don't know what artificial intelligence is. That's the only thing he is interested in. Or I should be calling his school teacher and telling him this is what he's interested in, but you people are teaching him more or less of literature or history of the African kings. Who should I be complaining? Or is it the government? Who do we complain to?
I think we have to create change in ourselves. So I think that there's a gap between I noticed a gap between youth and seniors. So I've always been close with my grandmother and my aunts, and I've always looked back on how to know my next step moving forward. And so that's a practice that became a habit. I think we should reconnect with ourselves and our elders. There's this indigenous practice of learning through the words of your elders. And I think we need to go back to that. And the elders can learn from that exchange of information just as much as the youth can learn, and we're stronger together. Having dynamic perspectives and views and experiences creates something so unique that could only exist in that situation. So creating spaces for different ideas to come together, not in war, but in innovation and in legacy planning, which is lacking in our communities. Like you need to think about your grandchildren, even if they're not here yet. And I find in my peers, this is a conversation that people mostly are like, whatever, be quiet. You don't have kids and you're talking about grandkids. But the thinking is the same because my grandma took care of me and taught me most of the base of the science that I know today. She taught me, the different materials and minerals that were being mined, and the different foods and vegetables that were being grown, and the different, weather changes to be mindful of, and the effect that might have on your vegetables and your fruits, or the material your house is even built out of, during raining season or not. So looking back has a lot of great gems that shouldn't be disregarded. These are gems that can actually fix a lot of the issues we have today societally. And once at a society level, we create safe spaces, everybody wins. The tide rises and all the boats lift up.
Okay, so I'll just jump to the comment. I think there is a question. Most of it has been people praising you. You're intelligent, you're smart, this is great, and that. But we have one person who is asking if you'd be interested to do a mentorship program for students. Again, if you want to input, please feel free to unmute yourself and let's have a conversation. Yes, would you be interested in a mentorship program for, I don't know, students? And if so, what age?
It's interesting. I actually am a mentor for women that are entering the trades through a few local organizations here in Toronto and in Scarborough. So I do
should
mentor.
Name them. What are the names of these organizations so that some people who might be interested might join those organizations?
That's actually a good idea. Wood Green is the one that I'm the most active with, but I do some one-time events and science fairs in the community with the City of Toronto events. But yeah, Wood Green Community Services offers not just resources that like access to a mentor like me, and access to training and learning and also development opportunities. They also offer government funded education. So if you're in Toronto and you're interested in getting into anything from HVAC to precision machining and metal fabrication or welding or any of the construction trades, now is a good time to get in touch with Wood Green. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I do open peer mentorship too. So a lot of my mentees are actually older than me. So I have a lot of ladies in their 40s that are trying to now switch their industry because they've done the math and it makes sense to go where there's innovation and money being spent. So yeah, anybody that's interested in connecting, I'm accessible on LinkedIn. Just search my name and I'm pretty, if I don't message you today, I'll respond tomorrow kind of thing. But as for my own program, I look forward to doing that at some point next year. I would love to share even basic tools that I've come across and demonstrate how to use some of these tools that you might not think, like the same way you might not think your phone is a robot, but you might not think that one application can be used in a different way.
Okay, I'm going to put your link in on the chat, and anybody who is interested, you can definitely follow that and reach out to her. While I'm doing that, I'm also going to put in a couple of events. Anybody who is interested should definitely check them. We are running, well, not running, we've consumed our time. Thank you so much for doing this. But before we round up, the last thing that I want to ask is, what skills should I be telling a 7-year-old, 3-year-old to cultivate right now if I want them to be like you, especially if it's a Black girl?
Math.
Math, that's it.
Mathematics was my foundation, and I'm talking about I was 3 with a little basket, like an Easter basket, and just to keep me busy around the compound, my grandma used to make me pick pebbles and then sort them into piles by the color or the size, and that's how I started counting and dividing and multiplying, and that created my foundation for the maths that holds up most of the calculations I do in my job even today.
All right, Adolphina, thank you so much on behalf of Perspective Nation, on behalf of everybody who is listening. I think we are going to have more of this type of discussions. I believe this is the platform, or these are the type of discussions that community like us, Black people, and our friends need to be having consistently, because we have a lot of time. We are living in a very, very informative time. There is always now our robots on our hand. We can make them to good use to listening to people like you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask you to give us the last word, just so we round this up. And so tell us what other interesting projects you are working in, and if there's anything that you want somebody to join or support you in your entrepreneurial journey, this is the time to.
Well, right now, knowledge is power. So thank you to everybody who has shared their time and energy with us today, because we're stronger together. I do have a podcast. You can find the link on my LinkedIn page, and it gives you news updates,
what's the name
of trends.
What's the name of the podcast?
The name of my podcast is Doll Studio Presents.
Oh, okay.
So you can find me on Spotify. Listen, because I give some gems that come directly from the government in terms of news and financial investments that we should be in the room or front and center for, because these things directly affect us. So knowledge is power. Learn, 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 and listen, like, share, subscribe. You know, you never know who might benefit from this information, if not today, but in the future. But thanks to everybody for sharing time with me today.
I'm just trying to get the link of that podcast because I would like to join myself and take part in it. Anyway, we'll talk after this. Again, thank you so much. It's 9 o'clock. Thank everybody who has been here. It's been a very, very big learning platform today. And we are going to continue having these discussions. Please encourage everybody to inform others so that we make this community bigger. And I'm very happy that Adolphina now has a podcast. I'm going to go there and encourage everybody to join. So thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Forche. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Mafwa, Claire, Lady Abba, Digne, and of course, our guest tonight, Adolphina. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.
That was outstanding.
Yeah, bye.
That was just outstanding.